The last sound I heard in that house was laughter, Carl's ugly, wheezing cackle and Mia's shrill little giggle. They stood in the parlor surrounded by crystal glasses and velvet drapes, the wealth my mother left behind glinting all around them. And on the table between them sat the bill, crumpled, dirty, worth less than the necklace Mia had snatched from my neck before they shoved me out. $10. That was the price of my life. Carl leaned back in his chair, swirling brandy, and said, "Never thought I'd get rid of her so cheap. But $10 is $10. Mia clapped like a child, sliding my mother's pearl bracelet onto her wrist. "We can finally have a life without her," she said sweetly, like I was some stain she'd just scrubbed out. I was shoved into the arms of a stranger with a folded guardianship contract. He smelled like ink and tobacco, and his grip on my arm was iron. "She's yours now," Carl said, raising his glass. The door slammed shut behind me. The lock clicked. And just like that, I was gone. The stranger dragged me 2 blocks before letting go. "You're not worth the paper this contract is printed on," he muttered, tossing it at me. $10 is a joke. Run along before they change their minds." He walked away without a glance back, leaving me clutching the worthless contract in the dark. I stumbled to a park bench, the cold biting through my thin dress. I had no money, no family, nothing but the echo of their laughter ringing in my ears. I wanted to scream, to march back and burn the house to the ground. But rage without power was just noise. I pressed my fists against my knees until my nails dug into my skin. I whispered a vow to the night. "If money is all they understand, I'll make money my weapon. I'll make it my throne." The next weeks were survival. I slept under bridges, stole scraps from markets, scrubbed floors in exchange for coins. Every humiliation burned me hollow, but inside that hollow something new was growing. A hunger. I began noticing things, how a merchant raised prices when it rained, how gamblers in the alley fixed their games with loaded dice, how bills passed from hand to hand until no one remembered where they came from. Patterns. Flows. Numbers. Money wasn't just paper. It was power, shifting through invisible strings, and I could see those strings clearer than anyone. The first time I touched money again, real money, it was a single dollar I earned from hauling crates for a shopkeeper. My hands bled, my back screamed, but when that bill hit my palm, I felt stronger than I had in weeks. I didn't spend it. I kept it, folded tight in my pocket, and hustled for more. Within a month, I had $10. The same amount Carl had sold me for. I spread the bills across my lap that night under a flickering streetlight, staring at them until tears blurred my vision. $10 then was my price. $10 now was my beginning. I learned to multiply. I flipped coins into dollars running errands for men too busy to question a girl who listened more than she spoke. I studied the gamblers until I knew their tricks better than they did, slipping in with calculated risks until their winnings flowed into my hands. I hoarded every bill, hiding them in a tin box I buried under the bench where I slept. Each note became a brick in the fortress I was building in silence. But hunger doesn't stay small. It grows. One night, I slipped into a backroom poker game, my tin box tucked under my arm. The men laughed when they saw me sit down. "What's the buy-in, sweetheart?" A smile, one sneered. I laid $10 on the table, crisp and deliberate. Their laughter died quick. Hours later, I walked out with triple that amount. My hands shook as I counted it in the shadows, but my lips curved into the first true smile I'd worn since the night they sold me. This was how I'd rise, not with fists or fury, but with bills stacked so high Carl and Mia would choke on them. The years blurred. The girl who once slept under bridges became a ghost in the financial world, moving money through channels no one could trace, building companies with no face attached. Every time I touched a $10 bill, I remembered the night they sold me. And I swore I'd make that paper kneel to me. Then one night, I found myself standing in a boardroom, silk blouse sharp as armor, pen in hand. The papers before me bore a name I had chased in silence for years, the National Reserve. The Central Bank. The place that printed every single bill in circulation. The room buzzed with handshakes and signatures, but I barely heard them. My hand didn't tremble as I signed, sealing the deal. When the papers were done, the director smiled at me. "Congratulations. You're now one of the controlling investors." I smiled back, cold and sharp. Because in that moment, I didn't just own banks. I owned the machines that printed the very money Carl and Mia worshipped. And I wasn't finished. A headline on the news that very night showed Mia smiling on the arm of a foreign prince, her name glittering across the screen. My stepfamily was still thriving. But not for long. The headline burned into my vision long after the screen went dark. Mia Whitmore, the glowing bride-to-be of Prince Adrian. Her emerald gown shimmered like poison, her smile plastered across every news outlet, her future brighter than it ever deserved to be. I sat in my penthouse high above the city, glass walls reflecting her face back at me over and over. They sold me for $10, but she was being sold to royalty wrapped in diamonds. My hand tightened around the remote until it cracked, and I whispered to the empty room, "Enjoy it while it lasts, Mia. Because your whole empire is built on bills I print now." I began gathering everything I needed to tear them apart. From Victor's files I had already seen their reliance on fraud and whispers of embezzlement. But Carl had gone quiet over the years, retreating from the spotlight, which meant he was hiding something deeper. I sent men I trusted to dig through his shell companies, to follow the trails he thought were invisible. Within weeks I had everything: debt piled higher than the chandeliers in their mansion, shady deals with offshore accounts, whispers of bribes paid to government officials. He wasn't thriving. He was sinking, propped up by Mia's engagement and the illusion of wealth. And illusions were my specialty. I didn't attack them directly. Not yet. I started with whispers, quiet and precise. Shares of their companies dipped mysteriously, creditors grew restless, investors pulled out of deals without explanation. Mia didn't notice at first, too busy flaunting herself in magazines, but Carl did. He scrambled to patch the holes, borrowing from the wrong people, signing contracts he didn't read. I sat at my desk, watching it unfold, sipping wine older than I was. Every document that slid across his desk, every interest rate that crushed him tighter, had passed through hands I controlled. He was dancing on strings I had tied years ago. Meanwhile, Daniel entered the picture. We collided at a financial summit where men twice my age circled like vultures. He was tall, sharp-suited, with eyes that dissected balance sheets the way a surgeon cut flesh. He cornered me after a panel, his smirk infuriating. "You play like a ghost," he said. "Money moves where you move, but no one sees your face. Who are you really?" I met his stare, my smile polite, icy. "Does it matter? You're watching me win." His smirk faltered, just slightly, and for the first time I saw something dangerous in him, not suspicion, but interest. He didn't recognize me yet, but his gaze lingered like he was trying to pull a mask off my skin. I walked away before he could dig deeper. Back in my penthouse, I ran my fingers over the first $10 bill I had ever earned, still preserved under glass. It reminded me of the vow I made on that park bench when my stomach was empty and my eyes were swollen from crying. Revenge wasn't about money alone. It was about rewriting worth. Carl and Mia had decided mine was $10. Now I would decide theirs. And it would be nothing. One night, while scrolling through stock reports, an alert flashed. Carl had mortgaged the mansion. Desperation. I laughed, the sound sharp in the empty room. The house my mother had built, filled with her art, her books, her memories, now belonged to the bank. My bank. I arranged the foreclosure quietly, slipping it through legal cracks until it was irreversible. When the notice was delivered, I had cameras placed to catch Mia's tears as movers carried her gowns out onto the street. The footage circulated online within hours, sympathy drowned by mockery. The princess-to-be had been evicted. I watched every clip, every cruel comment, sipping champagne until bubbles fizzed in my throat. That night Mia called Carl in a panic, and I listened in through tapped lines. "Fix this," she screamed. I can't marry Adrian if the world thinks I'm broke. Carl's voice was weary, broken. I'm trying, but it's like someone's choking us from the shadows. I pressed a hand to my lips to stifle my laugh. The shadows were mine. But the best part was yet to come. I sent Carl an anonymous invitation to a gala hosted at the reserve itself. He couldn't resist. Desperate men never could. When he arrived, sweating in an ill-fitting tux, he was ushered into a room filled with mirrors and chandeliers so blinding they revealed every flaw. And at the center stood me, in a gown the color of midnight, hair swept high, diamonds dripping from my ears. He froze when he saw me, his eyes narrowing, lips parting like he was seeing a ghost. "You," he whispered, voice cracking. I stepped closer, heels echoing on marble, and tossed something at his feet. A crumpled, dirty bill. $10. His face drained of color as he stared at it. I smiled, sharp enough to cut glass. That's what you thought I was worth. Now I own the paper, the ink, and the press that prints it. Tell me, Carl, what are you worth now? Carl's hand shook as he bent to pick up the bill. His fingers hovered like the paper might burn him, like it wasn't the same cheap note he had once traded me away for. When he finally touched it, his knuckles went white. You can't be her, he muttered, eyes darting over my face. She's gone. I tilted my head, the diamond combs in my hair catching the light. Gone? No. Buried, maybe. Forgotten, never. And now I've dug myself out, Carl, and you're standing in my world. His lips trembled as he tried to form words, but I didn't give him the chance. I clapped my hands, and a screen lowered behind me. Numbers, contracts, debts flashed in bold letters, each one tied directly to him. His face paled further as he recognized his own signature on documents he had tried to bury. This is fraud, he stammered. It's lies. My laughter rang sharp in the gilded hall. It's truth. I didn't just buy the debt you buried yourselves in, Carl. I bought the soil it's buried under. He stumbled back, sweat beading his forehead, and for the first time in my life I saw him not as the towering man who threw me away but as what he truly was, small, weak, terrified. Mia arrived late, heels clicking like gunshots on marble, her emerald gown clinging too tight. She froze when she saw me, recognition dawning in her wide eyes. Claire, she whispered. I smiled, cool and cruel. No, darling. Claire was sold for $10. I'm someone you can't afford. She sneered, trying to recover, but her voice wavered. You can't destroy us. I'm marrying Adrian. His money will save everything. I stepped closer until our faces nearly touched, my perfume suffocating her false bravado. Adrian doesn't marry bankrupt frauds. And thanks to me, you're exactly that. I handed her a thick envelope. She snatched it, tore it open, and gasped. Inside were photos of her fake deals, her forged signatures, her desperate bribes. These are lies, she screamed, voice cracking. I leaned close and whispered so only she could hear. They're truths. And there'll be headlines before sunrise if you test me again. She threw the envelope at me, but it fluttered harmlessly to the ground. Damon appeared at my side then, sharp in his charcoal suit, his presence steady like a shadow that had chosen me. His hand brushed mine, grounding me in the storm. He bent toward Carl, his voice cold. Your debts are no longer your own. They belong to her now. Every dollar you owe, every coin you scrape, it's hers. Carl's knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the marble floor, clutching the $10 bill like it might save him. The image was perfect, the man who sold me, begging at my feet for the very paper he worshipped. Daniel arrived at the gala later, his smirk curling when he saw the chaos. He approached slowly, eyes flicking between me, Carl crumpled on the floor, and Mia frozen like glass about to shatter. Interesting, he murmured. I thought tonight would be about networking. Instead, I find ghosts and ruins. He turned to me, his gaze sharp. Who exactly are you? For a heartbeat I considered telling him, letting the truth hang heavy in the air. but instead I smiled. I'm the one who decides what money means. And right now, Carl and Mia are worth less than the bill he's holding. Daniel studied me, suspicion flickering with admiration. Dangerous, he said softly. But I like dangerous. He left without another word, but I knew he wasn't gone. Men like him never left prey they couldn't quite identify. The gala ended in whispers and shattered illusions. Carl stumbled into the night clutching that $10 bill like it was his lifeline, Mia trailing after him with mascara streaking down her cheeks. Their empire was crumbling, and they knew it. I stood at the center of the hall, Damon beside me, and for the first time I let myself breathe. Revenge wasn't complete yet, but tonight was the first nail in their coffin. Still, even as triumph settled in my bones, one thought refused to fade. Daniel had seen too much. He had tasted the edges of who I was. And if he uncovered the truth before I was ready, the entire game could collapse. The city woke to chaos the next morning. Headlines screamed about Carl's debts, investors abandoned him overnight, and Mia's engagement to Adrian was suddenly postponed pending investigation. Every news channel played clips of her crying outside the mansion as movers hauled away furniture. I sat in my penthouse with the blinds open, watching the city buzz beneath me while sipping coffee sweeter than victory itself. But victory was fragile, and I knew Carl wouldn't go down without a fight. He was a cockroach, ugly, stubborn, impossible to kill without crushing. That meant I needed to crush him completely. Damon visited that afternoon, stepping into my penthouse without knocking, his gray eyes sharp as always. He tossed a folder onto my glass table. Your stepfather has friends left. Dangerous ones. He's begging them for lifelines. I flipped through the pages, names of officials, businessmen, men who didn't care about morality as long as their pockets grew heavier. Damon's voice was steady, but there was something under it, a thread of warning. He'll sell whatever's left of him to keep standing. You can't underestimate him. I met his gaze, holding it longer than I should have. I don't underestimate cockroaches. I exterminate them. For the first time since I met him, Damon's lips curved faintly, almost like approval. But then his expression hardened. And Daniel? He's asking questions about you. Too many. My chest tightened, though I kept my face calm. Let him ask. Curiosity won't save him. Damon leaned closer, his voice a whisper. Or it might expose you. Be careful, Claire. Hearing my name from his lips, my real name, made my skin prickle. He knew, and he wasn't saying it to the world. Not yet. That meant he had chosen me, at least for now. The gala had made ripples in the financial world, and Daniel wasted no time writing them. A week later, I found myself face to face with him in a marble lobby, his suit immaculate, his smirk sharper than any blade. He fell into step beside me as though he belonged there. I've been thinking, he said casually. You appear out of nowhere, topple a dynasty, and disappear behind mirrored glass. That's not an investor. That's an executioner. I turned, heels clicking, and met his stare. Maybe I'm both. His smirk widened. And maybe I want in. I froze, studying him carefully. He wasn't bluffing. His eyes glittered with genuine intrigue. Daniel wasn't afraid of me. He was hungry. Hungry for the kind of fire I carried. Dangerous, yes, but potentially useful. I brushed past him without answering, but his words followed me like a shadow. Wanting in meant he would dig deeper, and digging too close to my grave could bury us both. Back in my penthouse, I stood before the glass case where I kept the first $10 bill I earned. My reflection glared back at me, a stranger with diamonds in her ears and scars invisible to anyone but herself. You wanted to own money, I whispered. Now you do. So own them. Own everything. That night, I set the final stage. I sent invitations for a new gala, this time under my real name, Emily Whitmore. The whispers that followed were delicious. The girl they thought had vanished into obscurity had returned, not as a beggar or a victim, but as the owner of the reserve itself. I wanted Carl and Mia to see my face. I wanted them to choke on the truth. Damon tried to dissuade me, his voice low, his hand brushing mine with something almost like fear. If you reveal yourself, they'll come at you with everything. I pulled my hand away, my smile sharp. Then let them. The dirt they dig is mine. On the night of the gala, the hall glittered brighter than ever, chandeliers blazing, violins swelling, cameras flashing. I stepped onto the stage in a gown of silver and black, every eye locked on me. Carl and Mia sat in the front row, their faces ghost white. I raised my glass, my voice steady. I was worth $10 once. Tonight, I decide what you're worth. Gasps rippled, whispers rose, but I kept my eyes locked on theirs. For the first time, Carl didn't laugh. He looked at me like he was staring at a ghost returned to drag him to hell. The silence in the hall stretched until it snapped under the weight of gasps and murmurs. Reporters whispered furiously, cameras clicked, investors shifted in their seats. Carl's hand tightened around his glass until it cracked, red wine spilling down his cuff like blood. Mia's painted smile faltered, her fingers trembling against her pearls. I stepped down from the stage, heels cutting the marble, and approached them slowly. Do you remember it? I asked softly, though the microphone carried my words to the entire room. $10. That was the price of my life. $10 you pocketed like loose change. Carl rose, his face purple with rage. You're a fraud. You can't be her. Claire died. Emily disappeared. I smiled coldly. Emily survived. Claire evolved. And the ghost standing before you is real enough to crush you. I snapped my fingers and the screens around the hall lit up with documents. Ledgers, contracts, forged signatures, debt after debt, every lie they thought buried now projected in glaring light. Gasps echoed, investors rising to their feet, shoving papers into briefcases as if contamination might spread. Mia leapt to her feet, shrieking, "These are fake. She's lying." But the more she screamed, the more people recoiled, whispering about fraud and scandal. Adrian's family, seated toward the back, stood and left without a word, their faces stiff with disgust. Mia froze, realization crashing over her like ice. Her engagement was gone, her ticket to salvation evaporated in a single night. Carl turned on me, spit flying as he growled, "You think money makes you powerful? I built this family, I built this empire." I cut him off with a single laugh. You built nothing. You stole, you bribed, you sold your own blood for scraps. And I bought it all back. Every brick, every coin, every rotten deal now belongs to me. The hall erupted into chaos, reporters swarming, investors shouting, flashes blinding the air. I raised my glass once more, smiling through it all. Tonight, I declared, the Whitmore dynasty dies. And I am the one writing its obituary. Carl lunged at me then, his rage snapping the leash of dignity. But Damon was there before his hand could touch me, intercepting him with a grip like steel. Careful, Damon hissed into his ear, his voice carrying through the microphone left open. She doesn't belong to you anymore. She never did. He shoved Carl back, and the man stumbled, collapsing into his chair with the eyes of the entire city watching. The humiliation was exquisite. I turned to leave the stage, Damon at my side, but paused long enough to look back at Mia, her face streaked with tears and fury. You wanted to be me, I said softly, my words slicing clean. Congratulations. Now you know what it feels like to be sold. The gala was ruined for them but flawless for me. By morning, the newspapers didn't call me a ghost or a fraud. They called me the pawned heiress returned, the woman who had turned $10 into an empire. Investors lined up to throw money at my ventures, society whispered my name like a spell, and Carl and Mia were left exposed, penniless, desperate. But victory was a living thing, and it wanted more. That night, Daniel appeared at my penthouse, his smirk gone, replaced by something hungrier. He poured himself a drink without asking, his eyes never leaving mine. I know who you are now, he said quietly. And I have a question. Do you want an empire, or a kingdom? I stared at him, the city lights burning between us, and for the first time since clawing my way out of nothing, I realized this war was only half finished. Carl and Mia were buried, but Daniel was right. Owning them wasn't enough. I could own everything. Daniel's question hung in the air like smoke I couldn't wave away. An empire or a kingdom, he repeated, his voice smooth, challenging, daring me to admit what I already knew. I didn't claw my way out of the gutter just to win scraps. I wanted everything. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs, and met his stare without blinking. A kingdom, I said. Because kingdoms meant their own empires. His lips curved slowly, a predator's smile. Then you'll need me. He spoke with the arrogance of a man who had never heard the word no, but underneath his smirk I saw calculation. Daniel wasn't offering partnership out of generosity. He wanted proximity to my fire. He wanted to see how close he could stand before it burned him. I let him linger that night, sipping my wine, circling like a wolf testing the edge of the cage. But cages were for prey. I wasn't prey. I let him think he was choosing me, when in truth I was already deciding how useful he would be before I cut him loose. Carl and Mia weren't done struggling. In the days after the gala, Carl tried to rally what remained of his contacts. He stormed into boardrooms red-faced, shouting about fraud, slander, conspiracies. But I had already salted the earth. His accounts froze one by one, his business licenses evaporated, his friends stopped taking calls. Every door he tried to open slammed shut because I had nailed them closed. Mia fared no better. She showed up at boutiques only to be turned away, her credit worthless, her name poison. Paparazzi hounded her for comment, catching her in tears outside restaurants that refused her service. She had once mocked me for being sold. Now the world laughed at her for being broke. The taste of their downfall was sweet, but Damon's warning still echoed in me. Don't underestimate them. Desperate people weren't predictable. Desperate people burned everything when cornered. I doubled security, tripled it, filling my days with meetings and acquisitions until I barely slept. Yet in the quiet hours, when I stood before the glass case holding that first $10 bill, I couldn't stop my hands from trembling. Not with fear, but with hunger. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was legacy. I wanted the Whitmore name to rot, erased from history, while mine was carved into every stone building, every bill printed, every vault filled with gold. And that kind of ambition needed more than shadows. It needed fire. It needed Daniel's ruthlessness and Damon's loyalty. Both men had chosen to stand near me, for different reasons, but neither understood that standing near me meant surrendering to my storm. One evening, as I walked through the reserve's printing floor, the machines thundered like drums of war. Sheets of bills poured out, ink still warm, paper sharp against my fingertips. I stopped at a fresh stack, pulling the top note free. A $10 bill. Crisp, perfect, identical to the one Carl had sold me for. I slipped it into my pocket, a reminder of how far I had climbed. That night, I called a press conference. Cameras flashed, microphones buzzed, the world's eyes trained on me as I declared sweeping reforms, new regulations, and investments that would reshape the financial sector. But beneath the polished speech, I buried the real message in every headline: I was untouchable. Carl and Mia's empire was ash, and I was building a kingdom on the ruins. The press loved it, investors worshipped it, but behind the glow of the cameras I caught sight of Carl standing at the edge of the crowd, his face twisted with hate. Our eyes locked, and he mouthed words only I could read. This isn't over. I smiled at him, teeth sharp, and whispered back though he couldn't hear me, yes, it is. Carl's glare at the press conference wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. Within days, anonymous letters began flooding newspapers accusing me of fraud, corruption, even murder. The claims were baseless, but the sheer volume of them stirred whispers. Investors began to ask questions, shareholders demanded reassurances, and for the first time since taking control of the reserve, I felt the floor tremble beneath me. Damon came to me with a folder thick as a brick, filled with evidence of Carl's smear campaign. He's buying journalists, politicians, even street rats to spread lies, he said grimly. If you don't shut this down, people will start believing it. I paced the room, fury boiling hotter with every step. Then I'll give them something else to believe in. That night I staged a spectacle. I invited the press into the very heart of the reserve, walking them past the thunder of the printing machines, letting them see bills pouring out by the millions under my command. I handed one journalist a crisp $10 bill straight from the press and said, "This is the same paper they sold me for. Now I decide where it goes. I decide who eats, who starves, who survives." Cameras flashed, headlines roared, and by morning the smear campaign had been drowned in awe. But behind the applause, I knew Carl had seen the performance too. And men like him only grew more desperate when cornered. Meanwhile, Mia resurfaced. She slithered back into the spotlight with crocodile tears, giving interviews where she painted herself as the true victim. "My sister abandoned me," she cried, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "She stole everything and left me with nothing." The world didn't pity her. Instead, they mocked her more. Memes spread like wildfire, jokes about the heiress who couldn't hold on to her prince or her pennies. Every time her face appeared online, my allies sent me screenshots, laughing. But I didn't laugh. Because buried under her sobbing confession was a spark of defiance. She wasn't finished. Not yet. One evening, Daniel appeared at my door uninvited, his tie loose, his smile sharper than usual. "Your family is bleeding out in the streets," he said as he poured himself a drink. "But you don't just want them ruined, do you? You want them erased." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "That takes more than money. It takes war." His words slid under my skin, tempting, dangerous. He wasn't wrong. I didn't just want Carl bankrupt or Mia disgraced. I wanted their names struck from history, their legacy dissolved until nothing remained but the echo of their betrayal. I leaned forward, my voice cold. "Then help me finish it." Daniel smiled like a devil sealing a pact. "Gladly." With Daniel feeding me insider information and Damon reinforcing my defenses, I began the final strike. I bought out Carl's remaining assets one by one, always through proxies, until he was left clutching nothing but scraps of paper. I timed it perfectly with Mia's next desperate play, a televised plea for charity donations. She stood on stage in a glittering gown, begging the public for sympathy, but the cameras cut away when sheriffs stormed in to seize her jewelry as collateral for unpaid debts. The humiliation was exquisite. The next morning, my face was on every front page, hailed as the woman who had exposed and destroyed the Whitmore fraud dynasty. But victory had one last price. That evening, as I stood alone in the reserve, running my fingers over a fresh stack of $10 bills, Damon appeared at my side. His voice was quiet, heavy. "Carl isn't done. He's planning something violent. He'd rather see you dead than defeated." I turned the bill between my fingers, the paper smooth and sharp as a blade. "Then let him come," I whispered. "He buried me once. Let's see if he can bury me twice." The warning came true sooner than I expected. 2 nights after Damon's visit, I was leaving the reserve when the air shifted, heavy with the sense of eyes in the dark. My driver opened the car door, but before I could step inside, a black van screeched around the corner. Men in masks spilled out, guns glinting under the streetlights. Damon's voice echoed in my head, violent. I ducked as the first shot cracked the pavement, my guards returning fire, chaos exploding around us. I moved fast, heels hammering against concrete, heart pounding not with fear but with fury. They thought they could scare me into silence, drag me back into a coffin, but I had already clawed my way out once. I darted into a side alley, the stink of garbage thick in my lungs, bullets ricocheting off brick. A masked man lunged, his hands like claws, but I jammed my knee into his gut and wrenched his weapon free. My hands didn't shake when I aimed it at his chest. "Tell Carl I'm not so easy to bury," I hissed before pulling the trigger. He fell, groaning, and I ran. Sirens wailed in the distance, the chaos swallowed by the city's endless roar. My guards hustled me into a backup car, Damon already inside, his jaw tight. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He just studied me, his eyes stormy. He's escalating. You humiliated him in public, broke his empire, stripped his daughter bare. He has nothing left but violence. I sank into the leather seat, adrenaline still sparking in my veins. Then he'll make his last mistake soon. Damon's gaze lingered, heavy, searching. You're enjoying this. I turned to him, my lips curling into a slow smile. I'm winning. That's what it feels like. He said nothing, but the tension between us was thick, alive. For a fleeting moment, I thought he might lean closer, confess something, cross a line. But then the car lurched to a stop in front of my penthouse, and the moment dissolved into silence. The next morning, news broke of the attempted ambush. The media framed it as desperation, a fallen patriarch lashing out at the woman who toppled him. The world laughed at Carl, painting him as pathetic, his empire nothing but dust. But I wasn't laughing. I knew men like him didn't die quietly. If he couldn't destroy me in the shadows, he would try to drag me into them. Which meant it was time to end this on my terms. I crafted my strike like a funeral. Invitations went out for a charity event hosted at the reserve itself, promising transparency and renewal for the nation's financial future. Politicians, investors, journalists, every power broker in the city RSVP'd, curious to see what spectacle the Pond heiress would stage this time. But the true guests of honor were Carl and Mia. Their names were at the top of the list, written in ink they couldn't ignore. Desperate for any lifeline, they accepted. I wanted them in my house, surrounded by walls I owned, under lights I controlled, breathing air I dictated. On the night of the event, the reserve gleamed like a cathedral. Chandeliers blazed, cameras flashed, and I walked onto the stage in a gown cut from pure gold. The crowd hushed, the world holding its breath. And then the doors opened, and Carl entered, dragging Mia behind him. He was thinner now, his face gray, but his eyes burned with hatred. Mia looked brittle, mascara smudged, her gown borrowed, jewels fake. They froze when they saw me. I smiled, raising my glass. Welcome, I said softly, though every microphone in the room carried my voice. Tonight we honor money. The god you sold me to. $10. That was my price once. But tonight, we decide yours. Gasps rippled as screens lit up, filling the hall with evidence. More contracts, debts, photos of Carl's bribes, clips of Mia begging creditors. The humiliation was surgical, brutal, public. Carl's hand shook as he pointed at me, his voice breaking. You can't erase us. You can't, his words choked as guards moved to restrain him, but I held up a hand. Let him speak, I said. The room went silent, every eye fixed on him. Say what you want, Carl. But remember, every word you spit, every curse, every plea, it's mine now. Because I own the ink that prints the bills you'll beg for. His knees buckled, and he sank to the marble floor, Mia collapsing beside him in tears. Cameras flashed, the image immortalized, the man who sold me for $10, now penniless and broken, begging under the light of my empire. I stood above them, calm, steady, untouchable. The Pond heiress had returned, and this time, no one would bury me again. The photo of Carl and Mia kneeling on the reserve's marble floor went viral before dawn. Newspapers called it the $10 reckoning. Journalists painted me as a symbol of poetic justice, the girl sold for scraps who came back to own the currency itself. But behind the headlines, Carl simmered. I knew it wasn't over. Desperate men claw until their fingers bleed. The morning after the gala, Damon arrived at my penthouse, his expression harder than steel. He set a pistol on my table. He'll come for you again. This time, he won't send men. He'll come himself. I picked up the gun, weighed it in my hand, then set it back down. Then I'll be ready. Damon leaned closer, his eyes searching mine. Are you? Because once you cross that line, there's no going back. I held his stare, my voice sharp. I crossed it the night they sold me. We didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, as the city glittered under a full moon, Carl broke into the reserve itself. He came with nothing but rage and a pistol, stumbling through the corridors like a ghost determined to haunt me. Security caught his men, but Carl slipped past, driven by hate. I found him in the printing hall, the machines roaring, bills spilling into trays like rivers of power. He looked wild, eyes bloodshot, clothes torn, sweat dripping down his temples. "You," he snarled, raising the pistol. "You ruined me. You stole everything." I stepped closer, unflinching, the thunder of the machines drowning my heartbeat. "I didn't steal," I said calmly. "I bought. The same way you sold me for $10. Except this time, the price is your soul." He roared, finger tightening on the trigger, but Damon appeared from the shadows, his own gun aimed steady. "Don't," Damon said flatly. "You'll die before you take a step." For a moment, the air froze, tension stretching taut as a wire. Carl's gaze darted between us, madness flickering in his eyes. Then he laughed, broken and bitter. "She's not worth it. She was never worth more than $10. My hand snapped out before Damon could stop me. I slapped him, hard, the sound cracking through the hall louder than the machines. "And yet here you are," I hissed, "on your knees in the kingdom I built. Tell me, Carl. Who's worthless now?" The pistol wavered in his hands. His strength broke like glass under pressure. He dropped to his knees, the gun clattering to the floor, his sobs swallowed by the roar of the machines. Security dragged him away, and I stood tall, unshaken, watching the man who sold me vanish into the shadows for the last time. Damon holstered his weapon, his eyes never leaving me. "It's over," he said. I turned to him, a smile sharp as the blades of the machines. "No, Damon. This is only the beginning." The next morning, Carl was declared bankrupt, arrested for fraud and embezzlement. Mia tried to flee overseas, but every account she touched was already mine. Her face appeared on every tabloid, mascara smeared, hands cuffed, the pearls she once flaunted now evidence tagged in plastic bags. The Whitmore dynasty was finished. But I wasn't satisfied with ashes. I wanted monuments. That night, I stood alone in the printing hall, holding a fresh $10 bill. The same value they had traded me for, now crisp and clean, born from machines I commanded. I pressed it to my lips and whispered, "You wanted me gone. But I'll live forever, in every bill, in every hand, in every pocket. You sold me for $10. I turned it into eternity." The world celebrated the fall of the Whitmores like a festival. Headlines declared their ruin as if it were a national holiday. Investors toasted me in glittering towers, journalists called me the ghost who became a queen, and strangers sent letters praising the justice of my rise. But for me, justice wasn't applause. It was silence. Silence from Carl, rotting in a prison cell stripped of wealth and dignity. Silence from Mia, paraded through courts in handcuffs, her fake jewels confiscated, her face etched into public shame. The family that sold me for $10 had been erased, their voices gone, their legacy buried. And in that silence, my kingdom grew louder. I walked the reserve's printing floor one last time before the press conference that would cement my reign. The machines thundered, spitting out bills by the millions, each note carrying the weight of history. I plucked a fresh $10 bill from the stack, running my fingers over its sharp edges. The ink was still damp, the paper warm, alive. Once, this amount had been my price. Now, it was my throne. Damon joined me, his steps echoing against steel and marble. He watched me hold the bill, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said softly. "You've won." I turned to him, my smile cold and sure. "Winning isn't enough. I rewrote the rules. I decide what worth means now." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, almost in reverence. "Then maybe the world isn't ready for you." I stepped closer, slipping the bill into my pocket, letting the machines roar around us like applause. "The world will have to learn." Later that night, the press conference unfolded beneath chandeliers that bathed the hall in gold. Cameras flashed, microphones crowded my podium, the entire city watching with bated breath. I raised my glass, my voice steady, every syllable sharp as steel. Once, I was sold for $10. Tonight, I stand before you as the owner of the reserve, the guardian of your currency, the architect of your future. They put a price on me, but I made myself priceless. And now I own the very money they worshipped. The hall erupted in cheers, flashes blinding, my image immortalized on every screen. Daniel was in the front row, his smirk gone, his eyes burning with something I couldn't name: fear, admiration, desire. Damon stood at my side like a shadow bound to me, silent, loyal, unshakable. The dynasty that buried me was gone, but a new one had risen in its place. Mine. When the cameras cut, I walked through the crowd, every head turning, every whisper bowing in my direction. I stopped at the doors, glancing back one last time at the hall, the stage, the lights. Then I pulled the $10 bill from my pocket, holding it high under the glow of the chandeliers. They sold me for this, I said softly, not for the cameras but for myself. And I turned it into everything. With Damon at my side and Daniel watching from the shadows, I stepped into the night, my heels striking marble like gunshots, my kingdom stretching out before me. The Pond heiress was gone. In her place stood the woman who owned the very ink of the world. And no one, not Carl, not Mia, not even death itself, would ever sell me again.